Good evening and welcome everybody, or welcome in the morning to Dreaming Up 5781 Synagogue Tech and our Dreaming Tech sessions. Wherever you're joining from, I welcome you. Hopefully, if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, you'll see there is a link below where you can join us on Zoom if you wish to, and join us and come into the community, and you can ask additional questions there. If you're watching and you want to ask questions, this show is the show where you choose the questions we answer. Those questions you enter using Slido. The link to Slido is below. With this, there is also on here, we will bring in the Slido link so that you can put it in here. So that will now come on the screen with us, and you can you can spotlight that. Sorry, you can click on or look at the QR code, read that QR code, and you can enter your questions here. And we've got a number of questions. We're hoping to be joined by our guest this week, but at the moment the guest is being delayed. So we're going to start off with some of the questions, and we're going to go straight into the questions that we have that have come up on here. But before I do, I just wanted to turn around to our panel and ask our panel of people to introduce themselves quickly and explain who they are and where they're coming from. So first up on my list I have is Brett.
Hi, my name is Brett Hanser. I'm a rabbi in South Florida. I also have spent most of my adult life, and before that actually, working with tech and AV and stuff like that. And so combining the two and being able to offer some help and advice is kind of a privilege. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brett. Next up for me is Marty.
Hi, I'm Marty ATS Communications in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm an audio and video engineer, consultant, and contractor.
Next up for me is Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah Mühlstein. I'm one of the rabbis at the Ark Synagogue in London, UK. And I'm the tech rabbi, so I get to play with all the tech while leading the services.
Thank you, Leah. Next up is David.
Hey there, I'm David Paskin. I'm the Torah tech guy from South Florida. I'm also a rabbi down here.
Thank you, David. Going very quickly through this, I've got JLo next on my list.
Hey everyone, my name is Joanna, not JLo. I'm from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, former Unitarian Universalist choir director and music director, content creator, audio engineer, and all things tech and AV.
Thank you. And so apologies for that. I'm going to go to Oren next.
Hi, I'm Oren Steinitz, rabbi in Elmira, New York. Like I said, with a dirty past and apparently future in tech. So.
And where have I left off? Sorry, Andy Shaw.
Yeah, I'm a sound engineer, and I've been doing events, lots of Jewish events for 30 odd years, which is incredible. And the last year or so been doing streaming. Yeah, that's me.
And then I have got John Ittleton.
John, and I'm calling in from beautiful Monterey Bay, but Leo asking me to explain myself. That's a heavy question. But I'm a retired professor failing retirement, but the area of instructional technology, training, education, and I've done a lot of work with state parks and other organizations.
John, you're a little bit hot. I just say that on there.
I say that's not normally what people say about me, but I apologize.
Guy.
Hey, good morning. I think John's wife was saying the same thing, right? Bobby. Good morning from Seattle, Washington. I have a store called DVE Store, which sells video equipment, a lot of the PTZ cameras, lighting, microphones, that kind of thing. I also happened to do the live stream for my local church because I got voluntold, so I'm fresh off a stream.
I don't think I've ever heard voluntold as before, but I think there's a lot of us can actually be told that was it. I generally, I think I'm always the one that didn't step back fast enough when the request came in. Right. Andy, can you bring Paul is actually in the waiting room, and can you add me as co-host, please? So he's in as an attendee. Okay, so before we bring Paul in, and he's just coming in there now, we've had a number of questions already come up, so we're going to go on to the questions that have come up on Slido. As we said, you, the panelists, sorry, you, the attendees, you, those watching out on YouTube and Facebook, you raise the questions, you decide the questions. So the questions are written, and you actually bring up and ask the questions in the order that you want to bring them up. So at the moment, you can see we've got a number of questions up here. So I'm going to take the first question. The way we do this is we ask the questions, the panelists are there to answer the questions. So we're going to take the first question, which I'm going to bring up, which is, what is the best way to run a PTZ camera to computer, especially if the distance between the two is long? SDI or NDI?
Do you want me to take that one, Leo?
Paul, welcome, Paul. I think it's time. It's glad that you're here, Paul. And maybe you can start by introducing yourself, and then we'll circle back to the questions later then. So maybe you can start by introducing yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Richards, and I am the Chief Streaming Officer at PTZOptics. Thank you so much for having me.
This is an absolute honor. A number of people here already know Paul. And there's, as well as working at PTZOptics, there's a lot more that you do for the industry. Can you just give us a quick overview of some of the things?
Sure. So one of my main focuses is on education, and through education, obviously empowerment of anyone who wants to learn about live streaming and video production. And through that effort, I actually started a little educational YouTube channel called Stream Geeks. And we have lots and lots of videos. I have a whole team of people who make educational videos and online courses. And then I actually write books. The whole process has been amazing, talking to people. And one of the books that I have written is called Helping Your Church Live Stream. And I wrote that in 2019. And it's gotten a lot of readership over the past couple of years, as you could imagine. And through that process, I've just done a lot of listening, right? What is it that houses of worship really want to accomplish? And what are the tools that the most popular, OBS, Zoom, what are these tools and how can we use them together? And through that process, I've done a lot of research and a lot of writing and a lot of video recordings, and they're all available on YouTube. And I've learned a lot, and I'm happy to share everything I've learned.
There's a lot to unpack in that. There's a huge amount to unpack in that, Paul. As you say, I mean, I've been following some of the stuff that you've done, which predates the pandemic. We've been watching how long have you been running the Worship Summit?
Yeah, I should mention. So we've been running a virtual event called the Worship Summit since we'll be on our 6th summit. So it's been about 2 years since the first summit. And what we try to do is bring together folks who are interested in learning about live streaming and video production in the worship space specifically. And through that process, Leo, we always send out a form. We say, hey, tell us what you want to learn about. And I could share some of those things. But what I've learned is that right now, specifically in the past year and a half to 2 years, everybody wants technical training. And so that's what we focus on now. We used to mix in a lot of leadership training, how to be a better leader, how to be a great pastor, how to share your message. But at the end of the day, 90% of our viewers are like, how do we figure out this tech? And the great thing is that there's awesome technology out there. NDI is on its 4th version, going on its 5th version, and it's becoming so much easier to use, saving churches and houses of worship so much money. There's so much new technology that's coming, just making everything so easy. Yet there's just some small fences that you have to climb over, right, in order to understand how to use some of this technology. And for me, it's easy, but I try to take a step back and remember that it's not easy for everybody to, use vMix with Zoom, right? And it's I've been doing that for 6 years. But for a lot of people, they don't even have the thought that it's possible. It's 2 different tools. How do I use these together? And I try to make some of those connections and share some of those workflows, because when you start thinking about what NDI is and you have like a basic understanding of what it can do for you, and then you start thinking, oh, I can connect that to Zoom. Oh, I can use that to mix a live stream. And just these high level concepts just are transforming what you can do with video technology today.
I think there's, as you say, there's a huge amount to unpack, and we've seen a big move from technology which was super expensive to becoming realistically affordable for churches and synagogues to deliver their environment. And as a company yourselves, you've got two different hats on, I guess. Is that the right description? Because you've got your PTZ and your huddle cam. Maybe can you explain the difference for those that are watching, because they see those two brands out there?
Yeah, so PTZOptics is really focused on pan, tilt, zoom cameras for live streaming specifically. And we solve a lot of problems for our customers by allowing customers to use a PTZ camera, which was a new term 4 or 5 years ago, and connect it to Ethernet, connect it over power over Ethernet with NDI and other things like that. HuddleCam HD is really a video communications company that I also work for. And that the idea of splitting the two brands was that HuddleCam HD, every single camera is plug and play USB. So we're really going down to the level of plug it into your computer. And you have to remember that was a new concept 4 or 5 years ago. Plugging in a USB camera into your computer that actually you can control pan, tilt, zoom on. Like the camera I'm using right now is the HuddleCam HD Pro. It's a 4K webcam, but it actually operates like a PTZ camera. But regardless, so HuddleCam is USB technology, very popular with like Zoom, GoToMeeting, cloud-based solutions. And then PTZOptics is when we start to talk about OBS, Wirecast, vMix, video production technology, and splitting those two off, those separately help kind of the customers understand what's the purpose behind the different workflows that we've tried to curate.
I think there's a lot of people out there, particularly who are watching this, who've been doing, have spent the last year staring at a Zoom screen, and delivering services on a Zoom screen. So talking from that huddle cam perspective, before we get into the PTZ or PTZ side, what is changing in that world, and why are these cameras that you're producing different to, say, the thing that's on the top of a laptop?
Well, one camera that's become really popular, and I'm seeing it on social media a lot now, is auto tracking functionality. So on HuddleCam, we have an auto tracking camera that will actually have the ability to follow a presenter at the front of a house of worship. And what's happening is, right now, a lot of, lack of volunteers, lack of help, yet high importance for being able to actually see the person that's speaking. And produce something that's engaging for online viewers. And so the auto tracking camera that we have, the Simple Track 2, I've actually kind of got it right here above me here. And these are being used in houses of worship all the time. And, it could be from a pastor or, a leader just using a webcam that's a little bit, gives them a little bit extra functionality, or a auto tracking camera that can actually follow and really simplify the technology, because it just works,
So you mentioned earlier that the one that you're on is a 4K camera. So what I'm taking a guess of there is, for those that don't see, you're producing the picture it's taking is 4K, which is 4 times an 1080p camera. But actually, Zoom typically doesn't go out higher than 720, or we did a trick of how to get your zoom up to 720. So does that mean the tracking means that you're staying within that 4K and still having a good picture?
Well, that's interesting you say that. So we have two different types of, you could call it artificial intelligence when it comes to tracking. So the Simple Track 2 camera that was right up here, this camera actually has 2 lenses on it. And so there is a small lens that's called the reference camera, and that actually will be able to show an entire stage and tell the 20x optical zoom lens where to go. So it actually can steer that camera. Now, the camera I'm using right now is the HuddleCam HD Pro. This camera has, yes, a 4K wide angle lens, and then it has the ability to zoom in up to 8x and actually create presets like a PTZ camera. And this camera is like only $299, so it's like in a very affordable one. And you can actually set camera presets so you can operate it. So if you're just wanting to make a little bit of a presentation, you can use a camera like this to do so. But where was I going with that? So zoom is less than 720 in most scenarios. So when you have a 4K image, you can really use the electronic pan tilt zoom without, it really starting to pixelate, because, you're zooming into that cropped image that Zoom's already accepting.
So I think we've covered some of the stuff there, and then you say that you move up from the HuddleCam stuff to the PTZ range. And from what it looks like, you've got those behind you as well. So where is the big difference between that, apart from the USB?
So with PTZOptics, everything is Ethernet connected. Almost all of the cameras are connected over the network, and so that provides a whole new world of IP video communication, and it really does make things easier. For example, you can plug an Ethernet cable into a PTZOptics camera and it will power the camera, so no need for an electrician. You can control the camera over that Ethernet connection. You can use NDI. You can send the video directly to Facebook. You could stream directly to Facebook or YouTube with the camera from PTZOptics, and you can even run the audio directly into it. Taking it a step further, that IP connectivity has allowed our engineers to build camera controls into software like OBS, Wirecast, vMix. The list kind of goes on and on. And that control capability, even some of our customers like to use an Xbox controller. They just plug it into, and that's a great way to get younger volunteers to find it a little bit more exciting to be volunteering to operate the camera.
I mean, I assume these cameras are available throughout the world. And while I'm asking the question, I'm just going to put up a poll for everybody who's there at home watching. Is just tell us where you're watching from. So it'd be great to hear where you're watching using the Slido that you've got. So are the cameras available everywhere?
Pretty much, yes. We do have distribution all around the world, including the EU and the UK. Basically, I don't really get involved in too much of that, but we have a partner team, partners at PTZOptics.com, who are able to connect everyone with the right people. Great.
So you were talking about the fact that they're connected by Ethernet. And you mentioned earlier that NDI, you said NDI version 4. I think for some people you've just said, or I've just used an acronym that they've gone, whoa, what was that? Can you just explain what that is and what it means to the world?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And we actually do see some of these concepts. We have a playlist on streamgeeks.com called Basics of Live Stream. And in that, there's a book and an online YouTube playlist. It's called The Basics of Live Streaming. And literally there's a video that says, what is NDI, right? Because we know that a lot of these, there's actually 22 videos, and it's literally goes right down the line of like, what type of camera do I need? What type of audio do I need? How do I live stream to Facebook? Like those high level questions. We've got videos for, and the NDI one's probably a good one to follow up on, because I'm going to try to cover a lot as much as we can today. But NDI is essentially an IP video connectivity hub that is basically free to use. It stands for Network Device Interface, and it came out in 2015, I believe. So it's been out for about 6 years now. And NewTek released it. And essentially what a lot of people use it for are the free tools that it comes with. So there's a pack called the NDI Tool Pack, and it's totally free. You just type in NDI tools, you download it, and get it for free. And it really has some powerful tools in there that you can use totally for free. One awesome tool is called NDI Studio Monitor. It's totally free again. You open it up and you can send video from your laptop to it, or from your laptop to OBS, or from your laptop to vMix. There's lots of different ways to send it. But one simple way that a lot of houses of worship use this is to have a laptop. Maybe it's got a presentation on it, maybe it's got lyrics on it, maybe it has some type of content that you're sharing, and you send it from the laptop on stage via Wi-Fi or via the network all the way back to wherever your live streaming computer is, where maybe you have a camera and an audio system. And just that alone wasn't possible 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, because you need to run an HDMI cable 200 feet, right? And HDMI cables aren't cheap, right? Wi-Fi is free. And it's really great, some of these tools that are available to allow you to do things you just couldn't do before.
So you said words there of running Wi-Fi on cameras, which sends shivers down my back from a personal perspective. But I think you're right. It's feasible and it's doable. Does that NDI stay within your actual synagogue, or does it go outside of the synagogue?
That is a good question. So the great thing about NDI is that it would stay completely inside the synagogue. It would use a technology called the local area network. And essentially, you have likely a router from your internet service provider, which might be Verizon, it might be AT&T, it might be Cox Networks. It could be any, I don't know. There's so many different, right? But your internet service provider gives you a router. You plug that into a network switch, and then you likely plug it into your computer, then maybe another computer, and maybe a printer, and maybe a Wi-Fi router. Okay, that's how the kind of network just high level spreads out. Well, you already have all of that. And so you can use it as your video switching and routing system, and it saves just like thousands and thousands of dollars, and turn a regular computer into a live streaming system, and another computer connected to it over that same system. And some of the advancements, which we don't have to get into all the technicals, but yes, you can start to use Wi-Fi at this point. They've integrated NDI HX, the new high efficiency version that allows you to kind of control the bandwidth and work within a lot of Wi-Fi networks for certain scenarios. And so it's making things a lot easier, so especially with Ethernet networks. Network switches can also provide power. It's called a PoE network switch. And you can get a 10 port, 20 port, 48 port PoE switch, and it can power your cameras. It can power the wireless routers. It can power a light. It can power many things. And it really reduces the need for like hiring electricians every time you want to put a camera over here or power something, an indication light, for an example.
Andy.
Yeah, hi, Paul. I was just wondering whether synagogues can use their existing Ethernet, Cat5 sort of cables, or whether they need to have special cables installed. Thanks.
Sure, I could take that one. So it is worthwhile to consider the cabling that you have. And we do have a video in this live streaming basics course called "What Cables Do I Need?" And it's actually like a 12-minute video that breaks down like every type of cable. It's probably worth a watch. But one of the sections of that video is about category cabling, which is, it's Ethernet cabling that comes in different categories. And the category that is ideal for an NDI network is Cat5e or greater. And so it is true that some older facilities may have Cat3, Cat4, or even regular Cat5 cabling that doesn't have enough bandwidth, or at least not the suggested bandwidth, to support IP video. So it is true that you may need to upgrade your cabling. If it's been put in the past 2 or 3 years, it likely is Cat5e or greater, which would basically give you what is called a gigabit of data and bandwidth. And so a gigabit is 1,000 megabits. You don't need to know, every megabit detail, but Yes, Cat 5e or greater is ideal for what is called an IP video network using NDI, and that gigabit networking infrastructure applies to the cabling and then the networking hardware. So you may have an older network switch that is only a 10100 switch, and it just doesn't have enough bandwidth to use it for 2 or 3 NDI sources. And while we're on that subject, it is something to consider. There's actually, I keep referencing these videos in the basics of live streaming course that we have, but there's one on bandwidth. How much bandwidth do I need to live stream? And there's 2 considerations there. One is the bandwidth just to stream to YouTube or Facebook, which some places actually have issues with, and there's loss of packet and losses of frames because they don't have enough bandwidth to stream to YouTube and Facebook. That's one question. But the other consideration when we're talking about NDI and IP video is the bandwidth on your local area network inside the synagogue. And then at that question, you're going, okay, how many IP video sources can I actually have on my local area network? And the answer to that question is, well, how many NDI sources do you need? Now, with NDI 4.5, as I mentioned, there's some new tools for limiting bandwidth, which help. But essentially, there's 2 types of NDI. There's full NDI and there's NDI high efficiency, NDI HX. And in general, most full NDI sources can be between 100 and 200 megabits. And that means with a gigabit network switch, you can only handle like 2 or 3, unless you have like a higher, bandwidth networking hardware. It's like a 5 gigabit system or a 10 gigabit system. But with NDI HX, and one of the new things with NDI 4.5 is that the screen capture tool is now available with high efficiency. And that was a big one, because if you were sending just 2 or 3 screen captures from this computer and that computer, then how much extra space do you have on a gigabit network? Only 2 or 3 more sources. But now that we can do high efficiency, both on the PTZOptics cameras, which could be a camera source, a video stream, but also on the screen captures now as well, you can do a lot more with just, and again, gigabit hardware is the most common and most affordable.
Hi, Paul. This is David. Thank you so much for being here. I have 2 questions stemming off of what you just said. The first is, I'm not sure I understand the relationship between PTZ cameras and NDI. I know you plug the PTZ cameras into Ethernet. Are they still using NDI? And then related to that, what about the placement of PTZ cameras? Can they be far, far away? Do they have to be plugged into Ethernet?
So it's they do not 100% need to be plugged into Ethernet, but it is very common because it's a simple way to power the PTZ cameras. So if it's far away, is there power there? Because if there's not that far away place, it'd probably be easier to run one single Ethernet cable than to hire an electrician to go put an outlet in a faraway place. With Ethernet cabling, generally 100 meters is like the longest length. And I mean, you could check with the specific cable that you're buying, but 100 meters is about as far as they go, like 320 something feet. So that becomes like a distance limitation, but 300 feet, 100 meters is a long enough usually for most spaces. And these cameras can be mounted on the wall. And I have one behind me. I'll zoom into here. This one's on the wall here. And this is like a wall mount that tightens to the bottom. So it's just flush mounted to the wall. There are other cameras, and I'm actually in my studio now. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but other times they can be installed on the ceiling. So there's one that's on the ceiling there. So sometimes they'll be put on a ceiling. A lot of times they're put on walls, and I'll show this one here. This one here is mounted on a wall upside down. And that is ideal for certain places where it is higher up. So if it's eye level, which is an interesting, I like to use a lot of eye level cameras personally, because I think it looks good when you're eye level with a camera. But in a lot of times you need to mount them up higher just to get overheads and different areas. If you mount it upside down, it will be able to get a wider, degree of pan and tilt and zoom, or pan and tilt at least. And then another thing I'll mention is at the top of this camera here, you see how there's a tally light there? I don't know if you can see that. That's a little indication light that's becoming more and more popular for places that have 2 or 3 cameras mounted in different spaces, so that there's a big red light that you can see, oh, that's the camera that I need to be looking at right now. And just something to consider. I just throw it out there. If you are putting multiple cameras out like that, it's nice to have an indication light of some sort that lets you know which one to look at.
What drives that tally, Paul?
So I think I can show this in action. What drives this tally is actually vMix, but it is possible to have them in multiple different scenarios. Let me see if I can turn this one on. I think it's this here. Let's see here. See it turn on and off a little bit?
Yeah, we can see it. We can, and that's done in You're doing that in vMix, you said.
Yes. So it is possible to see, there might be one more way I could do this. But yeah, it's they can be controlled. There we go. There, it turns on and off there. That is controlled by a controller that is called Tally Lights LLC, and it's plugged in via USB to my computer. And it just turns so that, I don't know if you noticed, but pretty much all of the cameras have it. So I don't know if you can see there. That one looks kind of, I put it on all the cameras just because, we have a decent amount of cameras here. And I've talked to many folks who are on camera, doing their live streams, and they've got 2 or 3 cameras and it's great. And they like the production value, but they're not sure which camera to look at any given moment. And so I wanted to just share that small little tip there. It's kind of an important tool for a lot of people.
Does that have to run on a separate cabling back to your computer, or does it run via the PTZ camera?
It does require a separate 3.5 millimeter cable. I do have my engineers looking into a way to pull the indication light directly out of the cameras, but I don't have any way to do that currently.
Real quick follow-up, Paul, on the Ethernet cabling into the PTZ cameras. I completely get why you would want to draw power over Ethernet, but is the video feed going through the Ethernet via NDI, or is it going, as you were talking about before, is it going over wireless?
I'm sorry, David, you asked that question and I only answered maybe half of what your original question was. Yes. The cameras can send the video directly over the Ethernet, which is nice. You can send NDI video from the camera directly into a lot of different solutions, directly into Zoom even. And then, although it's still more popular today, even today, I will say SDI video is still the most popular, but NDI is becoming it just allows you, even if you decide to use SDI from the camera, you still might be using NDI in another way. But SDI is still the most popular way to send video and capture it, but it requires these expensive SDI capture cards at the computer. And so NDI is becoming more and more prevalent, but it still hasn't taken the #1 spot over like SDI or HDMI, which the cameras also have. So it's been interesting to see that. It used to be, SDI 4 or 5 years ago, that was the only way to go if you were going to run a long cable. Now today, NDI is becoming, 20 or 30, because I kind of watch the numbers. It's like kind of my business. And NDI is slowly becoming more popular, but it still hasn't unseated the traditional video outputs.
Hey, David, this is Marty. How you doing? Thanks for being here. I got a 2-part question for you, I think. The first is just wanted to clarify with you. You mentioned HX, high efficiency NDI. Is that a second kind of NDI? How many different kinds are there, first of all?
Yeah, so originally, when NDI was first announced, there was one type of NDI, and it was really a single NDI, and it even caused some confusion because when NDI HX came out, NDI high efficiency, it was like, well, what's the difference? What do we call it? And so a New Tech made an official announcement. There's two kinds. There's NDI HB, which is called high bit rate, and NDI-HX, which is high efficiency. The difference is that HB has a high bit rate. So the bit rate is between 100 and 200, depending on some variables. And that bit rate, is compression, right? And it really is some of the highest quality compression algorithms like known to video. They use, and I don't even fully understand everything about what they're doing, but it is compressed. And to take you down just a short history, when it first came out, a lot of kind of snobbish video producers said, uncompressed is the only way to go. Why would I compress my video? But I think the visionaries, in my opinion, and the innovators with New Tech said, look, if we just compress this a little bit, look what we can do with a standard gigabit Ethernet network switch and what the amount of people that we're going to enable to have good enough streams. And it is way better than good enough. When you think about it, okay, NDI HB is 100 to 200 megabits compressed. NDI HX is generally between like 10 and 30. So it's a tenth the bit rate and the tenth the bandwidth necessary to use NDI HX, and it still looks great. But at the end of the day, for most people, we're sending like 2 megabits per second to Zoom, right? Or less. We're sending 4 or 5 or 6 megabits to YouTube and Facebook. And 6 megabits per second is considered television quality. So even though you're compressing the original source, which might be SDI or HDMI or a screen capture, from a usability standpoint, whether you're using Zoom or a live stream, there's not a significant loss in quality. Now, when you compress something, there is loss in quality. And where do you see that? Maybe in the shadows, when there's a dark scene, maybe in some of those crescendos where the color space has been slightly compressed. But when you're sending it to Zoom, when you're doing it's not a Hollywood production and you're streaming it to Facebook, those considerations really it's not as important, I guess you would say.
Well, thanks. You kind of answered my second question, which is that HX sounds almost too good to be true. Is there any kind of performance cost? So you answered some of that, but I'll ask, like, in terms of video switching or editing.
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, one major improvement to NDI in the video editing space and the video space in general is the ability to have a frame accurate video. And that's important when you're sending IP video or video over your network switch between 2 or 3 or 4 different cameras. And so it's low latency, but is it really frame accurate? And to make an NDI feed fully frame accurate, you need to use a network time protocol. And what that is called NTP. And it's I have to check, it's NTP or NPT. NTP. Network time protocol. And what
PTP, precision
PTP.
time protocol.
There we go. And a lot of you can sync your cameras up with Windows. It's like time.windows.com or time.apple.com, or Google has all of these servers all around the world, and you can actually sync up your NDI video streams with the exact same server. And so every single frame is frame accurate. And that's been a huge improvement with NDI. That was not available in the early versions. And now with NDI HX, to get to your question, it does seem too good to be true in some cases. And you do really need to sync up your NDI HX video streams with NTP if you want it to be as good as the high bitrate streams that are generally synced with a software or a hardware FPGA chip, which generates the high bitrate. But NDI HX is using H.264. It's a high bitrate stream. H.264 has been around for a long time. it allows new tech and the NDI developers to build upon what they've done with NDI. And they've done a great job. The brand new NDI screen capture tool. Screen capture is really one of the most popular NDI tools that are available today. It's now available just recently with HX functionality. And so before HX, you basically had, hey, here's an NDI screen capture. It's discoverable on your network. Go ahead and use it. It's great, right? It's so easy. You put it over here, you look at it over here, you've got it, they're connected. The bit rate's great, the quality's good. With NDI HX screen capture, you now have the ability to say, hey, I need a low bitrate version of this. My network can't handle 20 high bitrate streams. And you actually have the ability to choose between it, like high, medium, low, and there's a couple other settings in there. So NDI HX started to, for NDI, started to finally open up the ability to have some more control over the bitrate.
Oh, cool. So in some cases, so HX is a good solution if the network has limited bandwidth. In some cases, though, in doing an upgrade like this with multiple cameras and switchers and computers and things, we may put in a new switch, a new network switch that has sufficient bandwidth. So given the option, then, would you choose the regular NDI HB or HX? And do the cameras have an option? Is there an option for the cameras?
So there are full bandwidth, I guess we call it HB, high bandwidth, high bitrate PTZ cameras available on the market. And they use an FPGA chip designed for NDI. And they will have a higher quality, higher bitrate stream than an NDI HX camera. So that is true. Given the choice, budget, is one thing to consider. Because those cameras can be more expensive. They're using more customized chips. They will have a higher bit rate, higher quality video stream than an HX. So while HX has opened up a lot of doors with what you can do on a larger network, corporate network, university, in a smaller synagogue with a higher than maybe a gigabit switch, it may be a good idea to consider high bit rate PTZ cameras, high HB, high bandwidth. As I said, when you compress a camera, when you start to see a little bit of the pixelation through the compression, it comes at a time when maybe there's lower light, when maybe the sensor doesn't have as much information, and that's when it can be beneficial to have a high bitrate camera because there's less compression. Now, I'm a little bit of a snob in my studio, for example. I just run all the cameras via SDI, okay? And then I use ND, which is totally uncompressed, right? 3 gigabits of data as opposed to 100 megabits. So like 30 times as much. And I'm kind of a snob that way. And that's how I run all my cameras. And I use NDI in most scenarios when I just need to, I can't run an SDI cable. Like if I want to make my iPhone a camera, or if I want to bring a screen capture over here, or if I want to capture the Zoom meeting grid from another camera and pump that into the production, or I use it when I need to, and I use it all the time. I use it every day. But actually, with my cameras, it can be even more affordable and higher quality to just run SDI. As I mentioned, it's still the number one video connector.
I think we've covered, for a lot of people, they'll be going, they've heard, for some people watching this will be the first time they've heard about NDI, and I think we've covered a lot about that. And I want to go to some of the questions that we've got through on Slido. Actually, the first questions come from Oren, so I'm going to ask Oren to actually ask him the question himself, and I'll bring it up on screen.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Paul, for joining us. This is wonderful to have you here. We recently started using a PTZ cam in our small sanctuary, but as we'll be moving to our large sanctuary, hopefully when more people are vaccinated, is there a way for you to choose which zoom level camera you need to buy for a particular size of a room? Like if it's a 50-foot sanctuary, does a 20 times zoom camera enough, or do you need a 31? I mean, because there's obviously a big price difference. If you can cover that, that'll be great. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So the way that the Zoom calculations are put together, and by the way, you can go to ptzoptics.com/Zoom, and it will bring up the calculator. And that calculator essentially takes the distance between the camera and the person that you would like to zoom into. And so it's just a bit of, I think it's trigonometry. And essentially, it does a calculation that tells you the most important thing that you really need to focus on is the width. So when it's fully zoomed in. But you may want to also consider the width when it's fully zoomed out. And we actually have a design tool on our website that will allow you to draw a space. It's at designer.ptzoptics.com. It allows you to design a space and then drop the camera down onto it and see the wide angle and the tele zoom angle. And those are the two angles, because obviously when it's zoomed out, you've got a wide view. When it's zoomed in, you've got a tight view. When it's zoomed in, the calculation you're looking for is the width. What is the minimum width? So if it's a 3-foot width, you've basically got a head and shoulders shot of a person on stage. And to give you an example, the 30x camera can be placed 75 feet away from a stage and capture a head and shoulders shot. So that might be more than you need. If it's 50 feet away, you can do the calculations and see what a 20x would be. The drawback is, and it's a small drawback, is that the 12x camera does have a wider field of view. It can't zoom in as much, but it starts at a wider angle. So if you're placing one closer up and you want to be able to do a panning shot of a choir or a music area, that camera has a wider angle field of view at the beginning, which can help to capture those kind of closer up shots.
Awesome. Thank you.
The next question up, I'm going to ask Rabbi Leah to ask this one.
So it's actually from a colleague, Rabbi Dan Moskowitz is asking, we are planning a 3-camera setup in our sanctuary, NDI and PTZ cameras with 30x zoom. I'm assuming camera placement is left, right, and center, correct? And I'd be happy to offer an answer to that, but maybe Paul wants to come in first as the expert.
Well, every space is a little bit different. Left, right, and center is very common. I also sometimes see 2 in the center and 1 on the side. And the reason why it's nice to have 2 in the center is because they're PTZ cameras. So you might have 2 different places in the center of the stage that you want to capture and then switch between. And then the side one, depending on the way things are set up, the side one can be really nice to show. If you can mount it even a little bit further down, again, getting like those eye level shots that really make you feel like you're there looking at someone. For that one that's closer up, I maybe have, some pictures I could show, but the 12x that gets the wider field of view, if you can get that closer, still low enough so that it gets over people's heads, but closer from maybe sometimes they put them on the balconies. The further you are away, the less it looks like you're looking down upon someone. And the closer you are up, the more important it is to maybe come down on a beam or a placement where you can get closer to the floor so that you get a kind of more personable area. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but there's a lot of options. It depends on kind of what you're trying to capture. But yeah, you might want to put 2 in the back and then 1 on the left, for example.
So
I'm going to open this to the rest of the panel. Yep.
Can I come in on
All
that,
right.
Leo? So actually so in our sanctuary we do have the setup that we have 2, one underneath the other, because it does give us that flexibility. We just started with a 3rd camera, and actually, so Dan will know what I'm talking about, I think. So the way our sanctuary is set up is that we have the bimmer with the arc, and then our choir is actually in the congregation. So what we've actually done is a 3rd camera that is sitting on the bimmer, which we can use as our Torah cam for during the Torah service, so it can look directly into the scroll. But it's also a beautiful shot at the choir, when the choir is looking at the rabbis who are leading from the bima, because it's easier for them to be able to see us. So before that, we always sort of got a side view of them rather than face on. So we actually have, in a sense, at the front of the sanctuary and at the back of the sanctuary cameras, and that gives us almost a 360 option now, which also means, because we have some services where we like to try and arrange seating in a circle, where we can try and really take in the different angles, and that actually works very nicely for us.
David and then Marty.
Yeah, I just wanted to build off of what Rabbi Leo was saying. Boy, now my camera's fuzzy. I'm having camera problems today. I apologize. Is when we think about what everyone I think is thinking about now, it's hybrid sort of setups, and how do we make sure that our digital participants are not second-class citizens. I love the idea of having a PTZ camera on the bima up in the front that can not only perhaps show the choir, but can also show the congregation, so that people who are watching at home can see at times, at appropriate times, not only the leaders of the service, but the other people that are there participating, in the same way that people in the sanctuary, if you have screens up at the front, may be able to see people who are participating digitally. So I love that idea, Leah. Thank you.
Camera placement is a really interesting topic that we could talk a lot about, and Leah and David just read my mind, because I think about camera placement as part of telling a story visually. Everyone who conducts a worship is conscious of the arc of a service as a beginning, a middle, a crescendo, and an end. And for camera placement, you want to, one of the goals is to bring your remote viewers, your viewers at home, into the sanctuary, rather than being viewers at a window looking inside. And so think about the experience of being in the sanctuary, being able to look around and see other people, being able to look at different views. And so that's part of the craft, the art of camera placement, is to give you, the camera operators or the switcher, the director, the options of having all those different views to give people a real good sense of being in the sanctuary.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is coming again also from Rabbi Dan. We're deciding between BirdDog, their P200 NDI 30s, and the PTZ PT30X's NDI. Any guidance you can give between the two products? And if you don't want to give it, I may ask Guy to ask
I'm
that.
biased. I can't.
I'll turn that to Guy. Actually, that's a fair answer.
Sure, the bird dogs are going to have the larger sensors. They're also more expensive, $2,799 for the P200s, and they do have a special where you buy 3, you get a free controller. But I mean, bang for buck, it's tough to say. I mean, if you're going to go that route, you may as well start looking at the bigger Panasonics, and then there's a new Canon that just came out, the CE 500, I believe is. But the thing that I miss about NAB is being able to actually run the motors and do a nice deceleration to a stop. And the motors play a big impact, a big role, and have serious impact if you are doing following shots and then actually using that as part of the show. For a lot of us, we're just cutting static shots, and so it doesn't matter. The motors aren't as crucial. So, I mean, it's one of those things where do you want to put your money? Do you want to have more cameras, or do you want to have better color, or do you want to have better motion? So, and this is where feeling other people out in the forums and asking who has what and seeing what they say, because as a dealer, I don't want to say I'm biased on anything either, because we sell them all equally. Well, we do really well with PTZOptics, thanks. I mean, Paul knows we've shared booths together at shows. I mean, we've been a partner with them for a long time, and the line's been really, really good to us. So I'd say that we probably have more installs of PTZOptics than anything else out there, rather than Panasonic, Sony, or BirdDog.
That leads me on to a question which I've just put up as a poll, which is how many cameras, the people who are watching, how many cameras do you currently have in your sanctuary? And actually, Paul, maybe while people are answering that question, what sort of install base is there out there for PTZ?
Wow. Well, things have changed quite a bit in the past year or two. I will tell you that. In fact, it's quite astounding, and we are only one small part of a large industry that was hit so hard that couldn't even produce enough cameras to meet the demand by 1 to 10 practically at certain months last year. April, May, June, July. I mean, it was like houses of worship wanted to live stream. Every university wanted 300 cameras for every classroom. And it was an incredible time. I mean, I almost would want to guesstimate what is the percentage of houses of worship that are now equipped with live streaming gear of some sort. I would guess it's probably 60 to 75% that are equipped. Now you have to remember, some houses of worship still don't even have internet. I mean, it's true. There's places that don't have internet still. I got a phone call from someone who didn't have electricity in their church in Canada. So, not 100% we have not yet reached. But it's interesting because I would say 100% of houses of worship are thinking about how they're going to redo and upgrade and change what they have. Nobody is happy with the way it was set up. So last year in 2020 was a race to get whatever we could, install everything we could. And now it really is becoming, okay, what is a tally light? How does that help the pastor know which camera to look at? We bought him 5 cameras. He doesn't know which one to look at. So there's a lot of things that need to be considered still. I still don't. Okay, of the houses of worship that are streaming, how many of them are even know what NDI is? 10%, 20 maybe. I think there's a lot of room for growth and learning still.
I think we went into, so I wonder if Andy, you can just spotlight the information, the Slido that we're just looking at the list here, and you'll see that we had the majority of people that have come up. The biggest single one was 3 cameras, and it's just interesting. I think people seem to jump from 1 to 3 eventually, because as you said earlier, it's moving in the direction. And I could have actually put more than 3. Oh, I did put more than 3. Nobody's yet there, but I have seen in certain areas that there's more than 3. And I can see Brett is putting his hand up here. Maybe he's going to come in on this point. There, Brett.
So yeah, no, we're there, and of course now I want more, but that's a different story. Oh, I got 27%. You're never going to be able to plan for every scenario that you can imagine, right? You will always, at some point, want to add more, right? Which goes back to the conversation earlier about whether to go SDI or whether you need to get some very powerful routing that can handle that kind of when the number of cameras jumps up significantly. Another option, though, is to consider that besides placement, you may want some cameras that you have that you can add that are mobile, or at least semi-mobile, so that if you have those scenarios, that if you want for some service to place people in the back, or if it's important that you have an angle from inside the ark if someone is getting a blessing, or if you have a band and you want to be able to get a tight angle on like the keyboard or the drummer or whoever's playing, having the flexibility to do that. So some of that has to do with the cameras, and some of that has to do with the back end, making sure that you have the capacity to be able to add as you go.
Absolutely. Marty, did you want to come in on that quickly? Or?
Yeah, just briefly, the ability to grow and add more cameras means that you have to have enough, as Brett just said, you have to have enough inputs on your switcher to add more cameras. So when you're planning to make purchases, think about growth and think about adding the ability to add capacity later.
So going back to the questions that we had, the next question we had up is from David Paskin, which is, what is the best way to run a PTZ camera, especially the distance between if the two are long, NDI or SDI? So this is the question we got as you joined us at the beginning here, Paul.
Well, we talked about the Ethernet being the ability to power the camera. So that's almost in many cases a no-brainer right from the get-go. You can control the camera, you can power the camera. Whether you'd like to go with SDI or NDI becomes a question of, well, do you have an SDI connection? Do you have a Blackmagic switcher? Do you have an SDI to USB capture card? Or would it be easier for you to bring the camera in directly over the Ethernet, which I do at this point think that NDI has come to the point where it's pretty plug and play. There's not a whole lot of, networking knowledge necessary unless, as we mentioned, you get 10 or 20 NDI sources and you don't, have the networking infrastructure to do it. So it's an either or. As I said, I run all my cameras SDI, but this is a studio, it depends.
So I mean, I'll come back on this myself. My view in every single time I ever get asked this is run as many cables as you can run. The cheapest thing is physically running the cables. The hardest thing is to run them a second time or to pull cables in later. So if you are at that point when you're thinking we're going back into the synagogue or we're close to going back and you're running cables to put these things in, it's fairly cheap to run both. Even if you pull them in and you just leave the cables unterminated, the cost is actually typically it's pulling the cables in rather than the actual terminations. But I've never not found a need where I haven't wanted a few more Ethernet cables. There's always or Cat6 cables. There's always a couple there that you want. I'm just going to jump on to the next question that we have here, which is David again. Is there added value of having a PTZ? I assume that's PTZ if you just need good cameras but don't necessarily need the pan tilt zoom. Paul.
Well, if you don't need the pan tilt zoom, you can get cameras without pan tilt zoom and save a lot of money. That was one of the reasons why at PTZOptics we created a Z-Cam model, which just has zoom. And what our customers asked for was like, can you use the exact same lens? So we have a 12x Z-Cam and we have a 12x PTZ, and we have a 20x Z-Cam and a 20x PTZ. So the matching, the color matching can be done well. But you can save so much money by not having the motors. One camera that I really like is an electronic pan tilt zoom camera that's 4K like this one with SDI, and it's only $499 and it's got a wide angle field of view. So if you just need a static shot, you can save. It's a third the price practically.
I think it's my personal view is if you can fit them. The nicest thing I always think about the PTZs from my own experience is the control of being able to say something moves in the room, something gets shifted, the cleaner comes in and shifts something by 3 foot and you've got to realign everything. With the PTZ, you just move it on the camera, reset position 1, and it's done. And also it's the locations. I think in a lot of synagogues that we visited, you don't necessarily, you want a location that's out of the way, potentially, A, to not be touched, and B, the aesthetics of having a big camera in the way is just something you want to avoid. And for that reason alone, we're doing it. Leah, can you explain where we're trying to put that third camera at the moment?
I think I mentioned it that we've got it on the bimmer, so that we can use it also to look into the Torah, to look into the congregation, to get a different angle really other than just looking at the kind of stage in the sanctuary.
Okay, we're going to change tack slightly. A question in from Yuval Karen. Is there a holistic solution to interactive streaming of a synagogue service from Zoom and social media? So it's a general question to the panel. I'm going to look back at the panel because I can't see the panel. If anybody's got any hands up on this one.
Well, that could mean a lot of things. Trying to interpret what is meant by holistic.
Well, the question is, should you be doing everything to Zoom? Should you be doing everything streaming? Should you be doing both? What's the answer? So, Leah.
So I think what we found is that streaming through Zoom is not the greatest quality. I mean, you just lose quality once you send your stream from whether it's vMix or OBS into Zoom and then stream it live. What works quite well is we do this for our TOT service. So our TOT service, we allow only families with small children into our Zoom room, but we have lots of older adults who enjoy watching our toddler services, including Leo, who just watch the live stream. And what we do is we produce in vMix. So we send the vMix stream into as a live stream into YouTube and Facebook, and then we use an external output into Zoom. So vMix communicates kind of in both directions rather than routing it all through Zoom and losing quality. And when we bring in people, we tend to use vMix call to bring in people rather than trying to then bring people from Zoom back into vMix and into the production. That works quite well for us. It was a bit of a learning curve at first, but now it gives much better quality and you don't have the annoying Zoom logo in your live stream the whole time.
David, did you want to come in on that one?
Well, I'm clarifying with Yuval in the chat what the question really is. Yuval wrote an out-of-the-box solution to everything one needs to stream, which leads me to believe that maybe the question is about, we have been geeking out on SDI, NDI, PTZ, all this acronym mumbo jumbo, and I think that a lot of synagogues are not going to be sound, camera, PCs. A lot of synagogues are not going to invest the time, the money, the energy into doing all this research, and they're not going to invest the time, money, energy into hiring someone even to this research. They want to know, send me a link to the DVE store so that I can buy what I need, and I can, when I get to the synagogue, I can plug it in. I don't know. I mean, I know that Zoom has, some conferencing solutions, but if I'll just offer one thought about this, and that is that I really think that the challenge that we are going to face is not a technological, well, it's a technological challenge, but it's more than that. It's how are we going to create a service or an experience that is not only accessible, but engaging for the people who are in the room and the people who are not in the room. There's been a lot of talk of this for, I know Guy and Leo take part in office hours, and I know Alex Lindsay's big thing is digital first, right? That we really shouldn't try this hybrid thing. Well, I might agree with him, but we're all going to be doing the hybrid. And I don't think that there really is a plug and play solution, either technologically or otherwise, for how are we going to create that environment in which everyone can really feel engaged and participating rather than just watching a show.
I think this is super fascinating. If anybody else wants to come in on this, I wonder, Paul and John, what your experience is of other religions and how they're doing this. I'll start with John.
I'll defer to Paul and then I'll come up. John will follow Paul. Inside joke.
It's a good one, John. One way I could explain what I've seen over the past year would be to explain that, it started with streaming was the only thing that was like we could do, right? In March, April, May of last year. And then it was like, okay, the interesting thing we learned is that people from all over the world are joining. People who moved away from our local community started joining on these Saturday services, and you're going, oh my gosh, there are people out there who want to be digitally connected we didn't even know. So there was this opening of the digital world for the first time, and there's no closing it, right? it's been opened and we need to be there. Then, as we got through the past 3 to 6 months, things are starting to become this hybrid space. And we go, well, how do we, transition back? And the best things that I have seen, and it's all over the map, really, though, I have to say. I mean, some people, our church is in the parking lot, and we're sitting outside in chairs, and then we're trying to figure out like televisions and a PA system, but then there's still a vMix system, and they're putting a microphone in front of the televisions. I mean, it's not the best scenario because we're not sure if it's permanent. How long are we going to be doing this? Because we've got a great streaming system inside. But I think the hybrid world, I think Zoom is a great option for becoming a good bridge, right? It's not just a window, it's a bridge. A window would be live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, but that bridge of opening the two-way communication with viewers with Zoom is where I see hybrid working. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. I think that most congregations that are out there are less than 300. So a simple Zoom professional meeting license is enough to have a great moderator. And then the question becomes, well, how do we moderate this, right? Who's the moderator? Are we doing breakout rooms? And that whole Zoom experience, how do we incorporate the people that are in the, synagogue? And, it's people, I've seen it doing really well with some pastors who understand, all right, we need to engage the Zoom people, but at the same time, the service is happening right now. And so it's a mix of, trying to stick with traditions and making it work in person, but then having at least some interactivity beyond just a simple live stream in a Zoom session where it's well moderated and there's opportunities for breakout sessions where spiritual sharing and small group connectivity and communication can happen.
John, and then Leah.
Yeah, well, I think both Paul and Dave really hit the issues here. In the education space, and we're trying to educate, we didn't move from physical classrooms to remote classrooms in any organized sense. Essentially, the crisis hit, and a lot of the outreach was we took the tools we had, which were primarily designed for conference rooms, and turned them into remote classrooms. Had we thought, well, really, how do we reach people at a distance? How do we engage people who are physically with us and let people who are remote, whether they're homebound or whether they're at a distance, we probably would design it differently. And I think a lot of the initial decisions were, well, what hardware do we have? What's the technology? We were looking at it as a technology problem, where I think, David, you bring out, this is not a technology problem. This is an engagement problem. There's a different engagement when you're physically in the space than when you're remote. And when you're trying to do them both at the same time, how do you make sure that those people who are physically there have the experience that works for them, that those people who are remote have the experience that works for them? But there's this whole new involvement, is how do those interact in real time? And that's where you have a moderator or an announcer on the side, or somebody going along with the service. Time passes very differently when you're in a physical event than when you're just looking at squares on a screen. Intimacy is very different, and it might even be greater in a Zoom event because we have the squares in front of us. You could see people more closely than you could possibly see when maybe even if you're sitting in a small space with only 300 people. So I think this to me will be the interesting challenges that we look like at as we get back to where we could go back to normal, whatever that normal was. But we've had some events here that when they were physical face-to-face events, we were constricted by the space in the room. Only 500 people could attend. We went virtual for 2 of these events. They now have 1,400 people. The venue where they're going to try to do this live next year still only seats 500 people. How are you going to deal with that? And so I think these are the real challenges that we have in whether it's digital first or hybrid, or whatever the new term will be, and how do we face the challenges both technically, but I think it's more social challenges that we're going to have to deal with.
Thank you, John. Leah?
So I think the one thing I would like to add is for the in terms of kind of a plug and play all in one solution, it's also important to remember it's one thing whether the tech is all there, but equally crucial is how easy is it to actually operate all of them and actually make good use of them when you have very few people available who might be able to learn how these things work and how do you use the presets and all of these things effectively so that you can kind of also avoid the operator error when they suddenly press the wrong button and you see the camera swoosh all across the entire sanctuary and all your stuff that you didn't tidy away that wasn't ever going to be in the camera shot in the first place. Not that I speak from experience or anything. So I think one of the things that I would say about a plug and play, this is like really for the small congregations, because I do realize there are some where, actually they might only have 15 people in person and I mean, like my synagogue, for example, Friday nights in-person attendance is not very high. I am certain that we will have, when we go hybrid on Friday night, very few people who will come out in the evening. And if you only have 15 people sitting effectively around a table, then looking at things like the meeting owl might actually not be such a stupid idea. They integrate really well with Zoom. It's plug and play, super easy. It's not that expensive. And you can then use it for all your board and council meetings as well. So that just it's for a totally different scenario. But if you do have where in person is very small, there might be some other solutions to look at as well.
David, and then go to Brett on this.
Yeah, I did a show on my channel a while back. I forget what it was called, but basically the takeaway was in this new age, leaders need to know their tech and know their Torah. And I know that in rabbinical schools and amongst rabbis, everyone's saying, "Oh, they didn't teach me this in rabbinical school," or "I didn't want to be a technologist." I hate to be crude, but suck it up, folks. This is where we are, and you have to know your tech. I'm a kolbo where I am, so I'm leading the service, giving the sermon, singing, switching the camera. I'm doing, and that's just, it's a new kind of rabbinate or new kind of shlich tzibornit, a prayer leader, and so I think that temples, synagogues are very quick to think, oh, if I throw money at this problem, if I hire someone to do this, then all my problems will be solved. That's not the approach I take. The approach I take is give yourself a week, watch every YouTube video you can find on how to do these things, practice, make 1 million mistakes, embrace those mistakes, incorporate those mistakes into your next sermon, right? About tshuva, about repentance, about, tikkun olam, repairing the world, whatever it is, and learn how to do this stuff. Learn how to be that dynamic presenter, that dynamic leader. Learn how to use the tech and learn how to present your Torah in such a way that it is engaging for the people that are in front of you, both on a screen and off a screen. I really think it's going to fall on us. And that's a burden that I hope we as prayer leaders are willing to take.
Brett, you've got the last word on this one if you've got a minute.
Oh, the last word. I have so much to say about what David just said, but I'm going to refrain. So I want to go back to Yuval's question just for a second. The answer is no. There is no out-of-the-box solution, right? And the conversation kind of went to a hybrid place, which I think is really important. I like to start from a what are the goals kind of mindset, and to have a discussion about it, because is there a way to integrate everything that you're doing? Yes, right? Depending on what you're doing, that may look very different than someone down the street, right? Leah was talking about presets and the different possibilities, and the answer is, do you have 5 different people run AV for you? Or can one person control all of the cameras and do the switching so that you don't have to worry about it necessarily from the Bima, right? Do you want the people on Zoom and all of their boxes to be on a screen staring at the congregation that's sitting in the pews or in the chairs for the entire service? Is that going to feel comfortable for anyone or for everyone? Oren was talking a little bit before about people maybe don't want their faces shown on camera, right? There are so many different questions, and a lot of it has to start with a discussion and not necessarily just with what can technology do for me? Because the answer is technology can solve lots of these problems, but if you don't have a conversation about what you want or what the potential is for what you want based on the technology available, you may not end up with what it is that your goal was actually from the beginning.
So we're running out of time, but we want to get through some of these questions quickly. The next question was up, which you started answering there, Brett, but which is, there are different ways to control PTZ cameras. In fact, I'm going to ask Leah. She was, are you there to ask the question you put, I think?
I can. So presets in PTZOptics, presets in vMix, or manually controlling the cameras. When should you use what? I personally would be particularly interested in when is it an advantage to use the presets in PTZOptics and when the ones in vMix. I'm at the moment jumping back and forth between the two. So I'd love to hear Paul's view on that. But also I think for the general audience, it might be interesting to think about presets versus manual control of the camera.
Sure. And let me say, Leah, that I'm very impressed with your vMix knowledge using the external output with Zoom. That's something that seems to be mythical to a lot of people, but it's a great way to connect and preserve the quality, as you said, with your live streams and video production. You can control the PTZOptics cameras inside of vMix, and that becomes a favorite for everyone who has the 4K or Pro versions of vMix. If you just have a basic version, you can't do that. With vMix, there's a lot of great ways to control the cameras. You can connect an Xbox controller, you can use a Stream Deck, and vMix has all of these great features for making, shortcuts and access to PTZ controls available to users, which is great. One new feature in the latest firmware of the PTZOptics cameras is called Motion Sync, which allows you to sync the pan, tilt, and zoom movements between presets so that the pan, tilt, and zoom all end at the exact same moment. And that is a new feature that you can enable called Motion Sync, which will work for pretty much all of the presets that you're using, whether they're on vMix or directly to the camera. Inside of vMix, they just added the new focus feature, which I love. I really think it's incredible. It allows you to focus the cameras. I guess I could show you really quickly, but I won't go into it because we'll try to keep it quick since we're running over. But the ability in vMix now to quickly tap the focus and just dial it in, for most volunteers, I find it, if you're going to be a video producer and the camera person, have them use vMix because it really can do almost everything. If you have a secondary camera operator, that's when you can give them a joystick. You can give them the iOS app on an iPad. It's very popular. The free Windows and Mac software. Give them an Xbox joystick. But if you're one-man production, which happens so often, to have it all built into vMix is an amazing thing, and I'm a big fan of it. It's not a huge difference.
I think just a point to mention for those that are not PC, we will be covering next week some stuff on an alternative to vMix, which is Mac-based, which is Ecamm, and other software out there, because I know there's a couple. I just want to go through some of these other questions so that we can get through them. One question to you, Paul. A quick answer. I saw your recent firmware update included SRT support for your PTZ cameras. How do you see the adoption of SRT compared with NDI? How can you answer that in 5 words?
That is a very big question. So what I'll say is it's basically the next big thing that's going to happen that's going to be realistic. There's lots of great technology out there. But the coolest thing I see coming in the next couple of years is the ability to literally have all your cameras piped right to your home, and you don't even need to go to the synagogue to have the video production done. And it's possible with NDI and SRT. There's companies that are already doing it, and it's amazing. And it's going to become easier and easier because SRT is open source and free, and NDI is basically, built into a lot of the things that all of us are already using. So I don't have time to dig into all of it, but it's going to be the next really awesome thing, I think, for everybody.
There is some educational things out there. There was a mention of office hours earlier today, and there's a show about how to move your control of all of your stuff onto the cloud so that you can actually deal with that. That's Friday shows, and maybe if you want to talk to Guy afterwards, Guy can talk to you about how they've been experimenting. And that way you typically use SRT to connect the cameras up, or there are other ways of doing it, but SRT is one option. The next question we have here is Sabine Meyer. Is it feasible to even attempt a hybrid such as described by David and John, in-person, remote, interactive, with limited staff and financial resources? So I've got up here, John is the first one on there.
I would say yes. I think a year ago, if you had asked your volunteers, your congregation, who could do a Zoom call for outreach, how many grandparents now know how to use Zoom? Think pre-COVID. So I think the tools are known by a lot more people than we, I think, realize. Now, we've all been to some horrible Zoom conferences, so hopefully you get people who know how to use the tool well. But I think it's been so ubiquitous in terms of the tool that finding people who are capable of using it, they've been using it for their work from home, and it's just a matter of getting them to use those same skill sets in other areas and other venues.
Leah was the next up with her hands up on this one. But actually, I'm going to just ask before Marty or Joanne, did you want to say anything before you both have got to disappear? I know because you've got to disappear dead on. No. Okay. Marty?
We're good.
No? Okay, great. Leah? And then David.
So I think absolutely. I think, like David, I agree that people just have to, if people want to, they can step up and they can learn it. And there are some fantastic YouTube videos out there, and I think people come with lots of skills. I think if I would have to prioritize one area where you might want to invest to get professional consultant in terms of hybrid is audio. I think audio will be the trickiest aspect of it. Camera will pretty much be the same whether you have people in the room or not. I mean, unless they really jump into your picture in a way, but audio will be the tricky one when you turn on the speakers again in the sanctuary. And that's going to be a challenge.
David, quickly, and I think Marty wants to come back on this, David.
Yeah, I think it's the challenges of hybrid are not going to be, again, I don't think they're going to be technology. I think it's going to be, does the leader engage people in both realms? I think that's the challenge. And I'll just say one last thing is I hope that that all of us streaming our services will shine a light on how boring most of our services are, even in the sanctuary. I really do. I mean, I can't tell you how many Shabbat morning services I go to, and the rabbi and the cantor themselves, they look bored, and I'm not sure how I, as a viewer, much less a participant, should not be bored if the leaders are bored. I mean, we have to up our game, whether we're digital or in person. We have to do a better job. We have to create more engaging content, for lack of a better term.
Marty, did you want to say something on this quickly?
Sure. There are tremendous opportunities here. I think that COVID has presented us with a silver lining of opportunities. And even for the smallest congregation, in the smallest sanctuary, there's no reason that if done right and if you're invested, you can't grow your community to like thousands of people. and while simplicity and ease of use and out of the box is a fine goal, if it was that easy, we wouldn't need to be here.
So I'll end this question on to me, what is the worst that could happen? You've got to try it. You're going to have to try it. I remember one rabbi turning around to me once and saying that they didn't want the High Holy Day services recorded just in case there was going to be a mistake. You look back and you think of the number of services you've lost that we don't have the recording of anymore because they've gone. These things have gone. They've passed. I know this is really, really uncomfortable to certain people to do this and to go into this hybrid. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. But it's not going to be, you're not going to be sitting there going, well, that was a car crash and there's fatalities. You're just going to say the service didn't work, and we will learn and we will get better at it. And there's, has been said by a number here, that these things are going to continue and going to get there. And the equipment, as the people like Paul were talking about and Guy was talking about, is getting better and better and easier to use. A camera that follows you around. I mean, most of your congregation don't follow you around and watch you when you're walking around. So at least the camera will. So that's a great advantage. Moving on, because we're running out of time. Oren, a quick question here. Any tips on making NDI work more smoothly with OBS? I get a lot of drift and choppiness in OBS, which I don't get with this simple studio monitor. No, Oren has suffered from this. Has anybody got any tips on this one?
Was mostly for Paul.
I mean, one thing that I mentioned about the NTP time sync is something that will help your computer organize the NDI packets, the actual frames. So that is something to look into. We have noticed, and there's a knowledge base article on this at help.ptzoptics.com, that when you have 2 or 3, cameras, let's say they're coming in via IP streams and they're not synced with the NTP server, they can kind of drift a little bit. When they're synced, your computer itself can decode every single frame, so that will help. The other thing you can do is, if necessary, you can add a little bit of delay to the audio in OBS, because a lot of times it's not much, but like 25, 50 milliseconds can help. I guess the only other thing I would mention that's helped others with OBS specifically, in the advanced settings area, there is the ability to have the bit rate of your outgoing live stream be adaptive. And because NDI-HX does require, some decoding and processing, depending on how much, bit rate, bandwidth, and processing your computer needs, that setting allows OBS to dynamically change the bit rate. And I've heard that it really helps with dropped frames and just higher quality video in general.
Just really quickly on this guy, and then we're going to move on because we're running out of time. Go, Guy.
Yeah, download the free trial of vMix and give it a shot and see how smoothly it plays, and then pay the $60 and just keep it and leave OBS.
Yeah, I can't. I tell you, it is a steep learning curve. When we were talking about learning curves before, you have OBS, you have Zoom right down the bottom. Nobody, Zoom is straight on. Then you've got OBS, and vMix does jump up, but once you get over that hurdle, it just opens a world up. Ecamm sits somewhere in the middle and is, I think it's closer to the bottom, but the output is closer to the top. Right, we're moving on. The next question from Yuval: What tools are there to examine the impact of NDI on the local network? Anybody?
I guess
I'm good. Go on, Paul.
One thing on Windows is Windows Task Manager. I don't know if a lot of people know that tool, but Windows Task Manager has a bandwidth section to let you know the amount of bandwidth that is being used at any given time. So as soon as you connect to an NDI source, you'll see the bandwidth jump, right? And as soon as you're connected to your next NDI source, it will go up again. And most computers have a gigabit networks connection, so they can only handle less than 1,000 megabits per second unless you add a secondary connection. So Task Manager will keep an eye on that for you, and you can kind of watch what's coming in and coming out.
A completely different subject. Lawrence Smith, what are the panel's views on using head-mounted GoPros for services? I would be fascinated. Rabbi Cam. David. I'll start with David and Leah. I'm just thinking of this.
I love this idea because it's so insane. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, it's like tefillin. It's like wearing tefillin, I guess. I can't imagine. I mean, I love the idea of, a kind of a first person shooter, first person davener experience. I can't imagine wearing one while I'm leading.
Leah, did you have any?
I think for me, I think the key about engaging people online, just like engaging them in the congregation, is that they don't notice how they're being engaged, and like seeing the camera on my head the whole time when they're like, I think it's just going to be a distraction. It's like when people talk too much about how they are operating their cameras during the service, which is like, I mean, it happened to me because that was like all I was thinking about the first few services when I suddenly had to turn rabbi and camera operator all at once. But actually, people don't want to think about the technology the whole time. So I don't think they really want to see the technology the whole time. So while it's kind of cool, maybe a buttonhole cam. I think that's an interesting one. So if you can hide the cam, maybe that could be something interesting. But if it's too obvious, not quite.
Brett, did you want to come in on this?
So if anyone does it, I want a picture. That's the first thing. But the benefits of having it on your head versus having it on a stand right next to you, I think will be less distracting both for you and the congregation, and the benefits are going to outweigh the detraction from wearing headgear, both for you and the people watching.
I just think personally it's hard enough to get rabbis to turn the microphones off when they go to the toilets, let alone the cameras. That is going to be the problem with that one. Moving on. So the next one we've got is one of our synagogue goals is to provide a facility to enable services outdoors. So we're looking at experiences that others may have with mobile cameras. So I can see where now the conversation or the comments are coming in here. So David, do you have a quick one on this?
Yeah, so this is actually where I have used a GoPro. So we had a service, we did Simchat Torah, was it Simchat Torah? Something like that outside. And, so we were dancing and moving, and I put a GoPro on a little handheld, I tethered it to my phone, and I ran around and I chased the rabbi and cantor, and I caught different people dancing. And so that's when I definitely would, and I actually did think about strapping it to my head. That's when I might use a GoPro.
Yeah, I think the record in there. I've seen that for Havdalah actually as well. Havdalah outside, it works very, very well if you're doing that sort of thing.
And weddings outside also.
And weddings. Quick question from Sue. Are we going to be doing an audio session? Yes, we are going to be doing an audio session. There is a lot to cover with this. We've got a number of sessions. Leading on from this session, the next session after this we're going to be doing is going to be on virtual cameras and explaining what the differences are on different virtual cameras. The session after that, Brett is going to go into something called ProPresenter. That's going to be, we're going to give an overview of what ProPresenter is and why and where you can use that. And then we're building sessions up. One of the sessions we will be having very soon after that is going to be about audio and how we will deal with hybrid, as mentioned by others, that hybrid audio is a superly confusing area. Next question. Question from Yuval. Is there technology that overcomes lip sync issues between sound and audio? Anybody on that one?
Paul was just talking about it with the delay settings in whatever you're using to stream out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Some of these questions have already been answered. So David has asked, do PTZ have the face following? Can you clarify that, Paul?
So the Huddle Cam Simple Track 2 includes motion and facial tracking. And the reason why is because sometimes you don't have a face to track. If the rabbi is turned around and he's pointing to something, it reverts back to motion. But facial tracking does allow the camera to follow a human. It looks for 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, and that helps the camera follow. So it's actually a combination of motion and facial tracking.
So just to clarify, that's on the PTZOptics cameras, or?
That is available for the Huddle Cam HD Simple Track 2, actually.
Okay.
Just to be clear.
But it's not on the PTZ range at the moment on there. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for clarifying. Last question we have in the box is there a logical architecture that illustrates how NDI, OBS, Wi-Fi routers, central computers, and cameras are connected? So I'm going to, again, Paul, I think, have you got some things on this? You seem to be muted, Paul.
Sorry, I was just grabbing a slide to try to help maybe. But I have a slide here that might help. So essentially, everything on your network is connected to a local area network, right? Which has your router attached, and everything's connected to the network switch. And so with over here, you're seeing like vMix, but that could be OBS, that could be Wirecast. If you have a Wi-Fi router, that would be connected to your smartphone, to a laptop. You can see a computer here. One thing this is showing, just high level, that there is something called NDI Access Manager, which allows you to have a logical architecture of your NDI sources. Most people don't know this, but you can actually say, I only want my NDI sources to go to this computer and not any other computers, which is just a security feature for NDI that's out with 4.5. So I hope that's just a simple slide. I don't think I can find anything super quick and easy but hopefully that kind of helps a little bit there. They're all connected via Ethernet to a network switch on your network.
Thank you for that, Paul. We've covered tons of things. The people out there put in all their questions. We've answered or tried to answer as many of them as we can. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear from Paul about where some of this is. Some of it may be a bit technical. I would guarantee if you watch this back in 3 months' time after you've been doing certain things, you'll be going, I understand everything on there. But everybody's on a different journey and are learning with this. And we are trying to run these services running these sessions so that we can help people out there, so that you're not alone on this journey and that you can turn to resources. There are literally years of experience on panels like this, and I'd like to thank the people involved. I'd like to thank the people that have already left us. Unfortunately, a few had to go on to other sessions, so they'll be back for others later. As I said, next week we've got a session that's going to be run by David. We're just trying to work out if it's going to be on virtual cameras or it's going to be just on eCam to work out, because that gives a balance of where we are. The session after that, as I said, is going to be on ProPresenter. And after that, we're going to probably move towards the audio side of the chain, where the complexity, particularly around hybrid, is going to be facing you. Because while the video, if the video is working, you can see it, you know it's working. With the audio, the number of times, including an event, I went live last week on the wrong audio microphone, and as John tried to quietly point out to me while I was live and I had turned everything off, there's nothing you can do really when you're live using the wrong microphone, and we've all done it. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and I'd like to, if you want to get involved in this, please note there is the link on there. You can join us in the after show Zoom, which is open now, or will be open as soon as I close this link. The link was in the in the show notes that you got, and we will see you there. Thank you all. Goodbye.